Can everybody in the back kind of move up? We got more into the seats to be nice to move up a little bit. I'd like to call to order a work session on marijuana licenses that will be before everybody at this August 9th meeting. And we'll start with introductions on this side of the room, please.
May I be honest? Municipal Purchase Office, license official.
Francis McLaughlin, Planning Department.
Eric Croft, Assembly.
Alfred Jackson.
Kim Steele.
Forrest Dunbar.
Pete Peterson.
And the audience, please.
Chris Cutie, Director of Office of Economic and Community Development.
Terry Schoenthal, current planning manager. Pat Akey, community council member is attorney.
Barbara Jones, Municipal Clerk.
Thank you. Mr.
John
Butler.
Weddleton.
Thank you. Who's gonna run this work session?
We're ready.
Well, not run it. Who's gonna present?
Well, Amanda probably can tell you what the clerk's office has done. Mr. Trainee was the one that requested these work sessions on the marijuana licenses that are before the assembly on Tuesday. So the clerk's office has some information about that. The clerk's office also, at Mr. Dunbar's request, has copies of the applications that'll be before you on August 23rd, so you can get a pre-review of that. But I'll just ask Amanda to start and ask some other people to talk if she knows who else should talk.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Thanks for this opportunity. The clerk's office, along with the planning department, wanted to just run through the two licenses that will be before you at Tuesday's assembly meeting so that we can address any issues or concerns before they come before you. One of the licenses is Arctic Herbery, which was before the body and continued to this meeting, along with a new license, Alaska Rustic. So I am going to defer to Francis from the planning department to run through the just a quick overview about both these licenses.
Please. Mr. Trainee.
Just for the record, I want to note that those licenses came in front of the,
Economic and
yeah, whatever it is, our old Title 21, so much easier to call it out. And those were approved, sent forward to the Assembly recommendation. So, please go
Thank you,
on.
Mr. Trainee.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Trainee. The Economic and Community Development Committee urged approval of these two licenses with one change. To add a condition of approval, it had to do with signs. In regards to Arctic Herbery, this is on Arctic Boulevard, and the applicant has a small, is applying for a cultivation facility license, and our city's license and special land use permit for marijuana. It's a little house that used to be a someone's home and a hair salon, and it was kind of a little home business, but it's located in an industrial zoning district, the light industrial I-1 district, and they've renovated the building, and it'll be a small cultivation facility, and then in the future they'll be applying for a retail establishment license as well. In terms of the zoning code, Title 21, our land use regulations, their proposed site plan meets all of the minimum requirements we have for the zoning code. We don't have any issues. Do folks have any questions about that one before I move on?
This is one we had one complaint, I think, from neighbor, just concerned about proximity, but it does fit within the.
You testified at the former hearing, right? Thank you, Mr. Steele. Please continue.
Thank you. So on that note, Mr. Steele, at this the Assembly's committee meeting, the applicant brought 3 photographs taken from the front door of the establishment facing Arctic Boulevard, because the complaint from the neighbor was that they were going to be looking directly at this marijuana facility, and they didn't want, flashing lights, advertised marijuana, and that sort of thing. And the photographs that were taken at least showed in the summertime quite a bit of vegetation on the far side of Arctic Boulevard. I think a window from the home is visible, but I don't think much of the rest of the residential neighborhood across Arctic Boulevard is really visible to this industrial zoning district in this site. Yeah, thank you. One other item is with the proposed site plan that you would see on page 8 of your packet. Let's see, 8. Well, there's going to be maybe that's not a good example. There's a revised site plan that shows some parking lot perimeter landscaping, or it might just be a landscaping abutting Arctic Boulevard. It's landscaping required by Title 21 abutting Arctic Boulevard that will. There's going to be some landscaping required on the site facing Arctic Boulevard. Whether or not that blocks the business's the view from the street, not really, but it is a requirement. So there'll be some additional landscaping.
Mr. Steele?
I'm sorry. I saw Amy was leaving, by the way. She said she had satisfied all her requirements, all concerns, and said she would not be here. But she said that there was an agreement that they would not have, flashing lights and stuff, just a small sign on the front of the building.
Through the chair, thank you, Mr. Steele. Yeah, so no sign is proposed for this cultivation facility. No sign at all. However, in the future, with a forthcoming application for a retail establishment, they do want to have signage, but they're restricted to just having a building sign, a sign on the building. There's some restrictions on the size of the sign and how it could be built, no flashing lights and nothing that could appeal to children, so you couldn't have a marijuana leaf or something like that. I'm not sure all of the state's requirements on signs, but we also have our local sign ordinance. But there will be no pole signs on the street like typical of other businesses.
Thank you. Mr. Train?
This deal, my son deals with grilling. The retail will be a separate application coming through to us. At that time, they're gonna have to meet all the requirements for retail establishment. Today, all we're looking at is agriculture. So, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Train. Please continue.
Thanks. That's all I have, unless there are other questions from the assembly on this.
Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the gentleman, when we had our meeting earlier this week, mentioned that he was only going to put a sign on the front door. That was his plan. And so unless you're stopping, driving down Arctic Boulevard and looking at his front door at the danger of being rear-ended, that's about the only time that you would be able to see his sign. And some of the vegetation that's there now were like spruce trees, so that they will be there year-round, but they're not going to, it's not like a tree that is going to lose the leaves in the fall. So I think visibility of his establishment is going to be not great.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Steele?
I'm sorry, one more time. Again, when they came to us before, they had both items in the packet, both the grow and the sales in the packet at our last meeting. So did they have to go back to the state, I guess is my concern in terms of the sales?
Amanda?
Through the chair, thanks for that question, Mr. Steele. So in their packet, it is a license for a cultivation establishment, but they referenced the retail establishment. They still need to apply for a retail establishment license. It'll go through the state process, and then that retail establishment license will come to the municipality, and he will need to come back to the municipality and once again apply for the municipal retail license and the municipal retail special land use permit. So you will see Arctic Herbery retail again before you. And I just want to take this opportunity while we're specifically talking about Arctic Herbery. I passed out a one-page paper email from McConnell. She captured the language for the amendment for both Arctic Herbery along with the next license that we're going to talk about, Alaska Rustic. And I want to take this opportunity to also remind the assembly members that on all these applications, when you look at the first page of it, it has section 2, and that section 2 specifically is applying to the license, and there's 2 conditions listed. As you're reviewing these licenses and you identify that there's other conditions that you think as an assembly member should be brought forward for this one, it's an excellent opportunity for you to make an amendment and suggest an additional condition. Section 3 is the special land use condition. So if you have concerns about particular businesses, landscaping, parking, what else is land use issues? Other particular land use issues, this is an opportunity for you as assembly members to address those concerns. One thing when we went through and worked on both the licensing and the land use ordinance, we wanted to make sure that the assembly had maximum control to address issues that your constituents were bringing for you. So also back there on the table, you have a copy of the original amendment, or the original ordinance amending Title 10, which is the land use, or the licensing component, which is 2016-16S as amended, and 2016-3S as amended is the land use component. So those might be things you might want to grab and as we go through and are looking at these licenses. Thank you.
Mr. Weddle,
I'm not raising my hand until I'm done chewing. Now, looking at the new site plan, I see 3 parking spots, and the old one had 4. Is 3 sufficient? Am I miscounting? Move the sidewalks.
I think there are 4 on the new site plan.
Are there 4?
If you look at the colored version, it's a little easier to read.
Oh,
There are
the
2.
colors,
Sorry, I think he's showing me one.
Unless I'm misreading it. 2 handicaps look like.
I think it's 3 in gold.
Well, it's not, that's not 2 handicap, that's sketch, that slashed area is so they can drop there.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
I see, oh, is that right? Because I counted 4,
Wait.
so that's not a spot there.
2 handicap.
Wait, so that's not a parking spot? That
The
other.
slashed area, no, that's room so they can drop their lift gate.
I'll have to study this for a second to, you could return to that question about number of parking spaces. Just take me a moment to.
right, do you want to continue with anything else?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Speaking to Mr. Steele's comment and to add to what Ms. Moser said, the Arctic Herbery was the first ever application that the planning department has accepted for special land use permit for marijuana license. And the applicant intends to apply for these 2 types of licenses, and he submitted, being the first applicant, and he didn't know that he should only talk about 1. When I reviewed his application initially and scheduled it for the assembly meeting, I wasn't troubled by the fact that he talked about this other license that he intended to apply for in the future. I thought it was sort of captured the totality of what the site and what it was planned for. The request that's before the assembly is simply for the cultivation facility. The retail establishment will come to the assembly sometime soon in the future, but it'll be a different application. You'll see some of the language and the site plan will all be the same, but at that time he'll be requesting the retail.
Right,
That's
we're
helpful.
aware of that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, are you still
Yes.
reviewing the question that Mr. Weddleton had?
And one more thing, through the chair, the proposed amendment language that I passed out, the clerk's office will put it in amendment form and have it available for someone to move at the meeting on Tuesday.
Thank you.
So the Madam Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton, this is a cultivation facility application The requirement, because the structure is so small, and the parking requirement for these two uses within the building, only 3 parking spaces are required. Should the assembly want to take another look at the number of parking spaces with a forthcoming application for retail, they can and make changes to site plan as well. So you can either do it now, or you could do it later, or you might be good with it in both instances. I just want to let you know you have a second bite of the apple.
Thank you. We were out there, along with others, I'm sure, and it didn't look like there was room for even 3 parking spaces. Mr. Trainee?
I've got no problem with the parking requirements for the agricultural aspect of it. But when it comes to retail, I've got a real concern, because you're talking about retail to all bank citizens. And if you've only got 1 parking spot, exactly where are they going to be parking at? I'm really concerned about when we go to that phase. Where the car's gonna go?
Well, I think that the
Is it
applicant.
behind a drive-up window or something, or what?
No, well, that's prohibited, right? So, the assembly adopted the regulations on marijuana zoning requirements, and the parking requirement was, I believe, 1 parking space for 350 square feet of retail. Gross, so 1 parking space for every 350 square feet of gross floor area for retail, and then for the retail sales establishment, and then for the cultivation facility, it's 1 parking space for 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. Because this structure is so small, 3 parking spaces meets the parking requirement. I'd have to go through and take the square footage of each of these uses and calculator to figure out whether or not the minimum parking requirement in this type of use is 3. So I don't know if they came up with 2 parking spaces were required or 3 parking spaces were required. But I think this site plan meets the minimum parking requirement for these 2 uses. Should the assembly want them to have more parking spaces, that would be over and above the minimum requirement. You could place, again, with the retail, a second bite of the apple, in the judgment of the assembly, we could maybe prepare some language to let you know the site meets the minimum parking requirement. If the assembly wants more parking spaces to be there, we'll have to figure out how to deal with that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, would you look at that, Francis, and get back to us?
Sure.
Because I can understand 1 parking spot for the agriculture aspect, but when you're talking about opening up to the public, 1 or 2 is not going to work. I mean, they're going to be parked up and down Arctic. And that's a concern, because it's a high-speed traffic, and there's no parking in there. So,
Thank you, Mr. Trainee.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Steele?
Yeah, I was a bit concerned about that too. I'm concerned about employees. Where are employees parking? Are they gonna open up the fence and park in the back? Otherwise, the only parking is in the neighborhood, walk across our. So, I'm a little concerned about it, but, we can establish it and see what happens, but they may have to open up the back and have some parking.
Okay, Mr. Steele. Please continue.
Yeah, just to respond to those comments, Mr. Trainee, Mr. Steele, I think that's fair. We can take a look at the parking. As I said, it meets the minimum requirements of Title 21, but if common sense says that there will be more parking spaces required, we should take a look at that. There's a lot of space behind the building in the backyard. The structure is really close to Arctic Boulevard. There's some discussion in the application, I'm a little rusty on it, because where the applicant acknowledges that that the retail will generate more, the retail sales establishment will generate more parking. Remember, the cultivation facility, which you're reviewing now, doesn't, it won't be open to the public, so there'll be no public access to it. It's prohibited, right? It's all secured building. But for the retail, when that comes to, so the application states he has a plan for how to deal with overflow parking. There's parking lots to the north and to the south on neighboring businesses that he might want to have parking agreements so that so that some of that overflow parking doesn't end up in a residential neighborhood.
I think we just need to note it at the meeting that when he comes forward, we're gonna expect that so that he can start looking into it and figure out what he's gonna do.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Paul?
Yeah, everything we're doing here is setting a precedent because they're all, because these are the first ones and they're all new. And so I just wanted to be very clear that it would be unfair to deny or overly restrict the cultivation license for concerns we have about retail. On the other hand, I don't want there to be any expectation just because he's given us notice that retail might be coming down the pipe. We haven't done that, so that could be rejected, that could be modified, that could be all that. Nothing we're doing here about cultivation promises or leaves any expectation of what's going to happen in retail. So I want to judge it based on the cultivation and be clear that we're not promising or just because he has put us, if you will, on notice in this document that retail's coming down, we haven't done anything on that. So I'm willing to treat it as a cultivation and cultivation alone, but I wanted to be crystal clear and on the record that just because retail was mentioned in it doesn't mean that it's been given any type of approval. It's coming.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. We understand and agree.
The fair thing to do is
Mr. Training and Mr. Middleton.
Just this, like I said before, this is just agriculture. There's no green light to go to retail, so to speak. But you mentioned earlier, we're not gonna have public going there, but somebody has to go to the cultivation to get the product to take it to processing spot. So there's still gonna be traffic coming in there, even if it's just agriculture, because it's gotta get from point A to point B. Star Trek doesn't exist, we can't just zap the stuff and move it from cultivation to processing. So it's not gonna be an empty lot, is what I'm trying to say. Thank you, Madam
Thank you,
Chair.
Mr. Training. Mr. Middleton?
I guess sticking with this parking for a little bit, if he were to go with this for the cultivation, then he comes forward with retail, and he realistically may need more parking. In the back, it looks like he's got a 20-foot lane to get back there. But if he put retail parking back here, he'd have to have a sidewalk come around. I mean, it would get complicated. If he designated this for cultivation parking, the back for cultivation parking now, they could enter through the back. And there's no sidewalk. We might need, I would just recommend you think about these things now, planning ahead. Because if he goes with this and then needs more for retail, retail parking won't work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Middleton. Please continue.
Okay, so the next entitlement before the assembly is this Alaska Rustic in Bird, Alaska. And this is an old sawmill. It's been in operation for many years in Bird. And the applicant wants to co-locate a limited cultivation facility license. So this is the first, there's two types of cultivation facility licenses with the state. There's the standard, which has unlimited amount of grow areas, and then there's limited, which limits you to 500 square feet of cultivation facility. So he meets that. So within a building on his lot in Bird, he wants to have this limited cultivation facility. It meets all the zoning requirements, the Title 21 regulations, with two conditions of approval that have been added to the boilerplate conditions of approval. And this applicant did an inordinate amount of door-to-door throughout the neighborhood and with the community council engagement, and got signatures of support from quite a few folks.
Everybody.
Yeah, everyone in this community. So I just would note that. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from anyone? Ms. Moser?
Thank you, through the chair. If you notice on page 1, section 2, number 3, there's a condition regarding past due taxes. This is an error, so the clerk's office is also to prepare an amendment to just delete and remove this language. This applicant does not owe taxes. It was actually template language from another licensee. We'll
I'm sorry, we're gonna look at that third one?
Oh, were there three?
But there's one coming
No,
up.
just two.
The third one is actually gonna be on the assembly meeting of the 23rd, so this is your jump start on
Right,
reviewing
but
it.
we weren't gonna discuss it
Right.
today.
Could I explain that briefly just so everybody's here? So I plan to go to the Title 21 committee, and we received those applications the day before in PDF form. And I asked the clerk's office if we could maybe get those a little bit further advanced in hard copies so we could make them up before that Title 21 committee, and that's why they're giving us these early. So hopefully we'll have them a week or two in advance before they go before the Title 21 committee, which is going to be happening before they go for the full.
Thank you.
Wait, are we adjourned? Can I make a comment on this for a
Of
second?
course,
Okay.
we're adjourned, but.
Okay.
Yeah, we're scheduled for one. so.
One thing looking at this that makes it a little different than the others, this is cultivation, manufacturing, and retail, which should be fine, could be, but his business plan for the cultivation, which we're looking at here, is that 80% will go to the retail and 20% go to manufacturing. Well, if those aren't approved, which is possible, what happens to his whole work plan's out of whack, or his whole business plan. So he has essentially connected those three approvals together by his work plan. So I don't know where that'll land, but it was something that jumped out to me.
So we're going to be talking about that at the Title 21 committee before August 23rd, is that right?
We will.
I think some of the things that Dane Wyrick, the owner, might say is he's got a very large industrial building in an industrial area. It's an I-2 heavy industrial zone. What was really important to him was to have a building that was secure. And so he's occupying a building that's formerly it's either armored car or some sort of security building.
Security.
Yes, thank you. And the neighbor is the other security armored car maybe. So within this large industrial building, I mean, it's a lot larger than the other applications that we see, I think, but he doesn't intend to occupy the entire building with the 3 licenses that he will be applying for right away. He has a larger building than he has capacity for initially. He's going to start small and then ramp up as the need may be, but he wants to ask for approval for these designated areas because that has to be associated with the building permit that he will be following up on. So I think he's got this building, he wants to get all of the proper approvals in order up front, but he may not have the 10,000 square feet of grow area all starting day one. But he does want to have 3 types of licenses. This initial application is only for, like we discussed for Arctic Herbery, it's only for the cultivation. Forthcoming applications for manufacturing and retail will come later should the state deem those license applications to be complete.
Can I ask a question?
We're not in the formal work session.
Okay,
It's
so
open.
for you and Dick, are we going to keep doing these work sessions if we're also doing the Title 21?
I had a conversation with Dick before the meeting started, and first off, it's the Community and Economic Development Committee, formerly Title 21. And we, at the Rules Committee, we made a ruling that they would all go before the Community and Economic Development Committee. And then the conversation that Dick and I had was that as a process, no, we wouldn't have a work session, but if we deemed it necessary to have a work session on top of that, then we would. So it's by,
I think we're going in different phases. I really don't think, from my perspective, for agriculture, we're gonna need to have it Friday on agriculture, but I do think as we get into retail, we need to play them by ear to see what kind of summer we're getting from the public. Because agriculture doesn't affect you, but if you find out there's gonna be retail down the street from you,
Yeah.
it's gonna fill the shrimp up with people, so I want people to deal with that.
Amanda or Barbara, can you remind us again, when is our first retail, have we received any completed retail applications?
Yeah.
So when is that first slated? September?
It's later than September.
Okay.
I'm not sure the assembly meeting date for, well, we don't have an application that we're processing for retail currently, but we anticipate him making application and paying the fee and getting scheduled anytime now. So it could be as early as next week that he makes payment and submits the application. By that, he wouldn't be scheduled until October.
The clerk's office has received a large number of applications, and as set out in the ordinance, the licensing ordinance, the clerk's office has sent notification to the ABC board that all these applications are under protest until they come in and apply for their municipality of Anchorage license along with their municipality of Anchorage special land use permit.
We had a community council meeting last night in Spinar, and we had at least 3, maybe 4 people present doing their community, their plan.
Yeah, the ammo can will become momos.
Oh, nice.
There's a number on Spenard Road, 3 that I'm aware
Yeah,
of.
the guy who used to grow Chinese food, you know, right by the hospital, yeah. Right, and right at the end of, right across from the Millennium, is basically where he is back in there. I'm
So-
not sure it's a great location.
Has the
Back
state,
into-
has the state issued retail licenses already?
Yes.
They have?
Oh, yeah, they've sent notification that they're deemed complete, but they haven't issued licenses.
Manny, my
They're
question
under
to you
protest.
is, have we gotten any money from the state? Because they're supposed to give us half their money. Is it coming in yet?
I would have to refer that to Rose.
Well, actually, Erica and Rose and I, that money, we have spent a lot of time working with Treasury and Chris, and that money is being processed just the same way alcohol is. And my understanding is that we get paid twice a year in July and maybe July and February.
So we're getting IOU from the state of Alaska?
We're getting what?
An IOU from the state of Alaska that's prorated?
You know what, I think that
That's
might be a
something
good way to
that's-
describe it, Mr. Training. I do not think that any money has, I expect some money should be coming sometime, but it would be a very small amount, because it's only, some that have been approved that first quarter. But in any event, we'll follow up with you and let you know when that transfer comes.
Thank you.
If the state's gonna have float, generate float and get interest on it, we know, sure.
We'll let you know how that works. It's kind of complicated.
Yeah, we won't.
Mr. Jackson, could I thank everybody for coming? I thank the clerk's office and Francis and, Chris and Terry were here, and thanks to all the assembly members. Thanks to Amanda for bringing the floor amendment. Our goal is to make it easier for you on Tuesday night.
No, I think it's great, and I want to thank, I think I already did, my colleagues for being here, for being at any work session.